lied to me all your life." Mariana's scream broke the Christmas Eve silence, leaving all the guests paralyzed, with their punch glasses suspended in the air. Isabel felt her heart freeze. 15 years keeping that secret. And now, it exploded like the piñata hanging over their heads, threatening to spill bitterness instead of sweetness. "Daughter, please," she begged, extending her trembling hand toward her daughter. "Don't touch me." Mariana stepped back, as if her mother's touch could burn her. All these years, telling me that Dad had died of a heart attack. The festively decorated room now seemed like a courtroom. Ricardo, Mariana's husband, tried to grab her arm, but she pushed him away violently. "Do you know what I discovered? Today?" she continued, furiously waving a crumpled envelope. "Dad didn't die. He simply abandoned us to go live with another family in Guadalajara." The silence that followed was as dense as the aroma of guajillo adobo that still emanated from the kitchen. Don Vicente and Doña Cecilia, Ricardo's parents, looked at each other awkwardly. The elegant Christmas gathering had turned into a minefield. "It was to protect you, mija," Isabel finally managed to say, her voice almost inaudible. "Carlos, he... protect me?" Mariana's laugh had the bitter taste of betrayal. "Is that why you always treated this date as if it were sacred? Is that why these meals, these traditions, to hide your lie? The food, it was what kept us together." Isabel tried to explain, feeling each word scratch her throat. "When he left, when he traded you for someone else," Mariana corrected mercilessly. The small apartment in Colonia Narvarte, which hours earlier had been overflowing with the aroma of spices and the promise of reconciliation, was now suffocating with long-buried truths. Isabel sank into the sofa, her wrinkled hands clutching the fabric of her dark green dress. "I didn't want you to know that we weren't enough for him." The tears that Isabel had held back for years finally overflowed, marking furrows on her face already wrinkled by time and pain. Ricardo exchanged glances with his parents, silently indicating that they needed privacy. The three discreetly retreated to the balcony, leaving mother and daughter facing the abyss that separated them. "And every Christmas," continued Mariana, her voice now more controlled, but no less cutting, "every hug from you was stained by that lie." The dog Charo, oblivious to the human drama, approached Isabel and rested his head on her lap, as if knowing she needed that comfort. "The truth, Mariana." Isabel absently stroked the animal's head. "He didn't even say goodbye. He simply left. How could I tell my 8-year-old daughter that her father decided to start another life without looking back?" Something in Isabel's broken voice seemed to reach Mariana. For a fraction of a second, the successful executive gave way to the girl who cried during endless nights, asking when her father would return. "I saw you cry every night," Isabel continued. "I saw you ask about him. How could I say he was alive, building Christmas memories with other children?" Mariana walked to the window. Outside, the lights of Mexico City twinkled, oblivious to the drama unfolding within those walls. She thought of all the times she had looked at the starry sky, imagining her father watching her from some celestial place. "Why now?" Isabel asked, wiping tears with the back of her hands. "After so many years." Mariana breathed deeply, smelling the scent of Christmas candles mixed with the aroma of traditional foods. "I found his cousin on LinkedIn," she explained in a calmer voice. "I mentioned the anniversary of Dad's death, and he was confused. He said he had seen Carlos last week." The wall clock struck midnight. It was the moment when, following tradition, they should place the baby Jesus in the manger. Neither of them moved. "You hate me, Mariana," Isabel finally said. "But I understand. I lied to protect your heart, and now I'm losing it anyway." In the kitchen, the punch simmered slowly, its candied fruits dancing in the red liquid, like secrets submerged in a sea of consequences. "Until when?" Mariana murmured. "Until when did you plan to maintain this farce?" Isabel looked at the nativity scene. The manger, still empty, awaited the moment of celebration. "Until I could bear the truth," she answered honestly. "Until I understood that he didn't abandon us because we weren't enough, but because he wasn't." The silence that followed had the weight of 15 nativity scenes built upon an absence transformed into death. "Do you have his address?" Mariana suddenly asked. "No, I never tried to find out." Mariana approached the Christmas tree and picked up one of the envelopes she had distributed earlier, the one that never reached Isabel's hands. "It was supposed to be a gift card," she said, handing it to her mother. "Now I think we need another gift." "What do you mean?" "I want to find him," Mariana declared, with new determination in her voice. "Not to reconcile, but to complete ourselves." Isabel took the envelope in her hands, feeling its symbolic weight. "Together?" she asked, with a thread of hope weaving into her voice. Mariana hesitated, years of distance and resentment weighing on her shoulders. For the first time that night, she really looked at her mother, not at the liar she had just discovered, but at the woman who had faced abandonment alone, raising a daughter with the bitter taste of absence disguised as Christmas recipes. "Maybe," she finally replied. At that moment, Ricardo returned to the room, followed by his parents. They found the two women in a silence loaded with accusations, but possibilities. "Shall we continue with the scene?" he asked uncertainly. Isabel stood up, smoothing her dress with renewed dignity. "Yes," she replied, walking toward the kitchen. "The chicken and adobo should be ready by now." While serving dinner, Isabel observed her daughter from the corner of her eye. The truth had exploded like a grenade in the middle of their Christmas Eve, but perhaps, among the shrapnel, they could finally find something real to share. In the nativity scene, the empty space of the manger still waited. Perhaps, Isabel thought, it wasn't too late to fill the empty spaces and start anew. I will develop a dramatic story centered on Chapter 2, with intense dialogue and emotion from the beginning. Here it is, explosion in the room. "Will you leave me alone, Mommy?" Mariana's words cut through the festive air like a cold knife. Isabel froze, with the plate of buñuelos still in the air, and her wrinkled hand imperceptibly trembling. The silence in the room decorated for Christmas Eve weighed on everyone like a lead blanket. "I just thought you might like to try it," Isabel murmured, her voice barely audible above the sound of the carols playing on the old radio. Ricardo pretended to be absorbed in his glass of punch, while Don Vicente and Doña Cecilia exchanged barely disguised looks of disapproval. The dog, Charo, sensing the tension, took refuge under the table. Mariana rolled her eyes, that gesture Isabel had known since her daughter was a teenager, but which now, at 40, seemed even crueler. "I have wonderful news for everyone," Mariana announced, standing up and grabbing her expensive purse. Her bright smile didn't even touch her eyes. "Ricardo and I have decided to spend New Year's in Cancun." Enthusiastic applause from the in-laws filled the room. Mariana pulled an elegant envelope from her purse and began distributing what appeared to be plane tickets. "Dad, this is yours." She handed the first one to her father. "Don Vicente, Doña Cecilia, this is for you." Isabel waited, with hands folded in her lap, squeezing until her knuckles turned white. The envelope that was supposed to be hers never appeared. "And Mom?" Don Vicente asked, noticing the omission. Mariana shrugged, a calculatedly casual gesture. "Ah, someone has to take care of Charo. The accommodations in Cancun don't accept pets." Isabel's heart sank. It wasn't just the exclusion from the trip, but the naturalness with which her daughter relegated her to the role of maid, in front of everyone, as if it were the obvious destiny of an elderly mother. Something broke inside Isabel. Decades of silent altruism, years of swallowing insults disguised as consideration, nights crying alone while preparing food that no one really appreciated. The plate of buñuelos slipped from her hands, or perhaps she threw it. Not even Isabel could tell. The crash of the porcelain breaking against the tiled floor resonated like thunder amid the Christmas music. "Isabel!" exclaimed Don Vicente, jumping to his feet. "What's wrong with you?" Doña Cecilia nervously adjusted her pearl necklace and whispered something in Ricardo's ear, who nodded with a worried expression. "Now I see how it is," said Isabel, with a strangely calm voice in contrast to the inner chaos consuming her. "I'm good for cooking, cleaning, taking care of the dog, but not for celebrating with family." "Mom," Mariana began in a condescending tone. "Don't be dramatic. Someone has to stay." "Dramatic?" interrupted Isabel, raising her voice an octave. "I spend the entire year waiting for this night, preparing every detail. For what? To be treated like your servant." "Mariana," intervened Doña Cecilia with a sweet and poisonous tone. "I think you've been rude to her. In my time, mothers knew their place." Isabel's face lit up with indignation. One thing was to be humiliated by her own daughter. Quite another was to hear that woman meddle in something she didn't understand. "My place?" Isabel took a step forward, her gaze fixed on Cecilia. "Do you know where my place is? With my family. Not hiding in the kitchen, not locked in the house with a dog while everyone has fun." "Mom, enough!" ordered Mariana, her face turning into a mask of shame and irritation. "You're ruining Christmas Eve. Why don't you go to your room while we serve dessert?" It was the last straw. Isabel felt something breaking inside her, as if all the fragments of the broken plate had pierced her heart at once. With deliberate movements, she untied the apron she was wearing, carefully folded it, and placed it on the table. She walked to the bedroom in silence, while everyone watched in astonishment. When she returned, she carried a small battered suitcase. Mariana's eyes opened with genuine surprise. "Where are you going?" she asked, finally realizing that something irreparable had happened. "To a place where I am more than a servant with blood ties," Isabel replied. Her voice had a dignity that no one in the room had noticed before. Ricardo stepped forward, perhaps the only one genuinely concerned. "Doña Isabel, please, it's dark outside and it's Christmas Eve. There's no taxi." "I already ordered an Uber," she replied, brandishing her cell phone, the technology that Mariana always mocked her for barely knowing how to use. Mariana shrugged, and her expression quickly went from surprise to studied indifference. "Mom, always with her dramas," she told her in-laws, as if Isabel was no longer in the room. "She'll be back tomorrow, when she gets over her anger." Isabel adjusted her coat over her shoulders and walked to the door without looking back. When she closed it, she didn't slam it as everyone expected. She closed it gently, with the firmness with which one closes a chapter. In the solitude of the elevator, her hands trembled as she dialed a number she hadn't called in years. "Mom?" she said, when the elderly voice answered at the other end. "It's Isabel. Sorry for calling so late on Christmas Eve." As she walked out into the cold Mexico City night, Isabel felt something she hadn't experienced in decades: freedom. The taxi was waiting for her, and as she got in, she looked up at the window of the apartment where she had spent the last 30 years. The lights were still on. The celebration probably continued without her. But for the first time, she felt no pain, only a strange and comforting lightness. "Where are we going, ma'am?" asked the driver. Isabel breathed deeply, as if awakening from a long nightmare. "Coyoacán," she answered. "My mother's house." As the taxi drove through the Christmas-lit streets, Isabel thought about all the parties she had prepared, all the dishes she had cooked, all the forced smiles she had shown. A lifetime trying to buy with food, and traditions the love that should be given freely. Her phone vibrated with a message. It was Mariana. "Who are you going to serve dessert to now?" Isabel turned off her cell phone and put it in her purse. The answer to that question was no longer her problem. Dawn invaded the room through the white cotton curtains. Isabel opened her eyes, disoriented for a moment. She didn't recognize the ceiling, nor the aroma of fresh coffee floating in the air. Then, like a wave, the memory of the previous night returned. "Did you sleep well, daughter?" The voice of Doña Guadalupe, her 86-year-old mother, sounded on the other side of the door. "Better than ever," Isabel replied, surprised by the sincerity in her own voice. The small boutique hotel in Coyoacán, owned by her mother, for decades, offered her a refuge she never imagined she would need at 65. The room, simple but cozy, didn't have the expensive ornaments that Mariana valued so much, but it had something more precious. Peace. Her phone, which she had turned back on in the morning, vibrated violently on the nightstand. Ricardo's name appeared on the screen. "Isabel?" "Thank God." Her son-in-law's voice sounded strangely tense. "Where are you? Come back now. Mariana is furious," Isabel added in a calm voice. "Because breakfast isn't ready, and the house isn't ready to receive the Christmas guests." An uncomfortable silence confirmed her assumption. "Doña Isabel, I understand that you are upset, but—" "No, Ricardo. You don't understand," she interrupted him, with a firmness in her voice she had never shown before. "And that's okay. I don't expect you to understand." "Stop it." Mariana's voice was heard in the background, followed by the sounds of a dispute over the phone. "Mom? What game is this? You're too old for these tantrums." Isabel felt laughter bubbling in her chest, something so unexpected it almost startled her. "Yes, I'm already too old for many things, mija, but it's never too late to learn to say no." She hung up the phone, ignoring the calls that immediately began appearing on the screen. She dressed calmly, choosing not the green dress that Mariana supposedly admired, but an embroidered cotton blouse her mother had given her years ago. As she walked toward the small inner courtyard of the hotel, she found Guadalupe chatting with Mateo, a neighborhood artist who often helped with small repairs around the place. "Isabel," Mateo greeted her with a warm hug. "Guadalupe told me about your unexpected arrival. What a Christmas gift." "For me, it was also a gift," she responded with sincerity. "I brought you something," he said, extending a package wrapped in brown paper. "For all the times you helped me with the hospital paperwork." Isabel carefully unwrapped the gift, revealing a delicate watercolor of Frida Kahlo's Blue House so close by. The vibrant colors seemed to pulse with their own life. "Because I believe you still have something important to give to the world," Mateo explained, pointing to a small inscription in the corner of the painting. "It's never too late to bloom." Those words penetrated Isabel's soul like a ray of sunlight on land that had long been in shadow. Unexpected tears sprang from her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Mateo replied. "Simply live." After breakfast, while helping her mother with the accounting for the small hotel, Isabel felt a growing unease. Her phone wouldn't stop vibrating with messages and missed calls, like invisible threads trying to drag her back to the prison she had built over the years. "What's worrying you?" Guadalupe asked, noticing her distraction. "I need to go farther," Isabel replied, surprising herself with her own certainty. "If I stay in Coyoacán, I'll end up going back. And I can't go back, Mom. Not yet." Guadalupe nodded with a wisdom only the very elderly possess. "Then go, but this time choose your destination." An hour later, Isabel was at the reception computer, impulsively buying a ticket to San Cristobal de las Casas, in Chiapas. A city she had always wanted to visit, but that Mariana had dismissed as too provincial. when she suggested a family trip years ago. "I leave tomorrow," she announced to her mother with a mixture of excitement and terror in her voice. "First, there's someone who needs to talk to you," said Guadalupe, handing her a business card. "Armando Gutierrez, an old friend, lawyer, volunteer in family law matters." Isabel frowned. "A lawyer? I'm not demanding anything from anyone, Mom." "No, but you need to know what your rights are. The house where you live, the money." Carlos left. Carlos left nothing but debts," she replied bitterly. Guadalupe took her hand with surprising firmness for someone her age. "I sold the house in Jalisco, Isabel. 3 years ago. The money is in the account in your name." The revelation hit Isabel like a tsunami. The old family home in Jalisco where she had grown up, where her mother had stayed until recently, was sold for her sake. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I knew you would say it was mine, to keep it for myself," Guadalupe simply replied. "But I already have enough with this small hotel. You need it more than I do." That afternoon, Don Armando confirmed what her mother had said. The money was legally hers, without complications. Enough to start a new life, far from the crumbs of affection she had become accustomed to collecting. "You can start over, Isabel," said the lawyer, with a kind look behind his thick glasses. "It's your right." As night fell over Coyoacan, Isabel found herself on the small terrace of the hotel, where some guests were gathered to celebrate Christmas. Strangers who smiled at her without expectations, without judgment, without the weight of decades of unexpressed resentment. Mateo appeared with a bottle of artisanal mezcal and served small doses in clay cups. "To freedom," he toasted, raising his cup. Isabel raised hers, feeling how the amber liquid captured the glow of the Christmas lights that adorned the terrace. "I am free," she whispered. The words were strange and sweet on her tongue. The mezcal burned her throat, but instead of pain, she only felt warmth and clarity. Her phone vibrated again in her pocket. This time she didn't even take it out to see who it was. Tomorrow she would be in San Cristobal, among mountains and clouds, miles away from the expectations that had imprisoned her for so long. Perhaps there, at last, she would discover who. Isabel was without the obligations that defined her. Mom, yes, always, but also woman, also human, also free. "What do you think?" asked an older lady who was beside her, an Argentine tourist staying at the hotel. Isabel smiled, feeling the wrinkles on her face not as marks of aging, but as lines of a story that was finally beginning to write itself. "That the best adventures start late," she replied, toasting again. "Da, but they start. You can't do this." Mariana's voice resonated from the other end of the line, so strident that Isabel had to move the phone away from her ear. "Actually, she can, and she already has," Don Armando replied, taking the phone from Isabel's trembling hands. "The preliminary hearing is scheduled for tomorrow at 10. I suggest you hire a good lawyer, Miss Castro." Isabel observed through the window of the Adult Justice Center how her lawyer ended the call. The folder of documents on the table between them seemed to weigh a ton. Each paper represented a link in the chain that had allowed her own daughter to try to sell the house they lived in without her consent. "How could she do this?" Isabel murmured, her voice barely audible. "My own daughter." Don Armando adjusted his glasses and pointed to a specific line in the sale contract that Ricardo and Mariana had signed 3 weeks earlier. "Here's the clause," he explained in a soft but firm voice. "The seller affirms being the sole owner, but that's false. The house was purchased during your marriage to Carlos. Half of it is yours by right. And to sell a property that partially belongs to an elderly person, explicit consent is required, in writing and with notarial certification." "She knew it," said Isabel, and the understanding sank like a stone in her stomach. That's why she took me to the notary last month, asking me to sign those insurance documents. Which, fortunately, you didn't sign because you didn't have your glasses, added Don Armando, as a slight smile redrawn the wrinkles on his tired face. Divine providence sometimes comes in the form of presbyopia. The return to Mexico City had been abrupt. Barely 3 days in San Cristobal de las Casas, enjoying the beauty of the mountains and the clean air of the Chiapas highlands, when Guadalupe's call changed everything. A neighbor had seen a sold sign appear in front of the apartment where Isabel had lived for 3 decades. With the precautionary measure, we will stop everything until the court determines your rights, Armando explained as he signed the papers with a steady hand. The sale will be immediately frozen. And if we lose? We won't lose, he said with a conviction that calmed her racing heart. The law is clear, and Judge Ramirez is known for her firmness in cases of elder abuse. The meeting in court the next day was like a scene from a movie. Isabel, in her best suit, not the green one that Mariana had deemed appropriate, but a vibrant red one that her mother had insisted she buy, entered through the side door accompanied by Don Armando. Mariana and Ricardo were already there, along with a lawyer in an impeccable suit who barely disguised his discomfort. When the gazes of mother and daughter met for the first time since Christmas Eve, Isabel felt something strange in her chest. It wasn't pain or anger. It was pity. How could you? Was all Mariana could say as Isabel passed by her. I want to ask you the same question, daughter, Isabel replied in a calm voice. Judge Ramirez was a middle-aged woman with severely bobbed gray hair and eyes that seemed to penetrate beyond appearances. When she entered the room, there was immediate silence. Case 247B, Precautionary Measure on Property in Colonia Narvarte, announced the bailiff. Mariana's lawyer presented his arguments first. Isabel was a confused and emotionally unstable woman who had abandoned her home on Christmas Eve, causing great disruption to her family. The sale was only a measure to ensure her a better home, more suitable to her needs. When it was Don Armando's turn, he simply handed the judge 2 sheets of paper. The first, Your Honor, is the original deed of the property acquired during the marriage. The second is a recording from yesterday, where Miss Castro herself admits that she tried to obtain her mother's signature through deception, making her believe they were insurance documents. The judge listened to the brief recording with an impassive face. When it ended, she removed her glasses and looked directly at Mariana. Are you aware that what you are doing constitutes a federal crime? The magistrate's voice cut through, the air like a whip. Property abuse against an elderly person is a form of family violence. Mariana's face turned pale. Ricardo seemed to want to disappear into his chair. I don't care what you wanted, the judge interrupted. I care about what you did. I order the immediate suspension of the sale and the imposition of a restraining order. None of you can approach Mrs. Castro's property without her explicit consent. The gavel struck firmly. And in that sound, Isabel felt something within her finally being liberated. As they left the courthouse, Don Armando smiled as he opened the door for her. Mrs. Isabel, you walk differently, he observed. Different? In what way? She asked, genuinely intrigued. Like someone who knows her worth. Isabel returned to her mother's small hotel in Coyoacán, where she had decided to stay a few more days before returning to her apartment, now legally protected. In the small room, she observed the watercolor of the blue house that Mateo had given her, hung on the wall next to a small reproduction of a Diego Rivera mural. Vibrant colors that celebrated life, resistance, and Mexican strength. Her phone rang. It was Mariana. Do you know what you've done? Her daughter's voice sounded unrecognizable, a mixture of anger and fear. You humiliated us in front of everyone. Ricardo is furious. His parents are horrified. And now we have to return the deposit money to the buyer. Isabel breathed deeply before responding. I'm sorry, Mariana. I'm sorry we've reached this point, but I'm not sorry that I defended what is mine. Yours? Dad paid for that house. Mariana's voice trembled with indignation. With the money we earned together, Isabel gently corrected. While raising you, I worked sewing for the neighbors. Your school uniforms, your birthday parties, your piano lessons. Every peso that came into that house passed through my hands first. A heavy silence settled between them. What do you want? Mariana finally asked, now with a more contained voice. I want what I've always wanted, mija. Respect. Isabel felt a tear run down her face, but her voice remained firm. And I'm not your maid. I'm not a nuisance. I am your mother. And I am a woman with rights, dreams, and dignity. Another silence, this time longer. Will you come back home? Mariana's question now sounded almost childish. Yes, I'll return. To my apartment, Isabel replied, emphasizing the word my. But now things will be different. That night, sitting under the soft lamplight, Isabel let the tears flow freely. They were no longer tears of pain or humiliation, but of relief, of rebirth, of late self-discovery. Guadalupe entered silently, carrying 2 cups of chamomile tea. Crying for him? She asked, assuming the tears were for Carlos, the husband who had abandoned her so many years ago. Isabel shook her head, and an unexpected smile formed amidst her tears. No, I'm crying for myself. She took a sip of the hot tea. For the woman I was and never allowed myself to be. Her mother nodded in silence, understanding, and sat beside her. Their wrinkled hands met in the middle. It's never too late, said Guadalupe, repeating, the words engraved on Mateo's watercolor. To find your voice. Isabel looked at the reproduction of Diego Rivera's mural on the wall. A scene of Mexican women carrying flowers, standing tall in their strength and ancient beauty. Women like her mother, like she should have taught Mariana to be. My voice, Isabel murmured, savoring the words as if they were new on her tongue. The next day she would return to the apartment in Colonia Narvarte. Not as a shadow or a servant, but as the lady of the house she always should have been. And if Mariana wanted to continue being part of her life, she would have to learn to see her with new eyes. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today, in this moment, Isabel finally allowed herself to exist fully, no excuses, no fear, unashamed, free at last. Chapter 5. Rebirth Among Flowers. Like this, very carefully, explained the instructor, while her skilled hands demonstrated the technique. Grafting is like adoption, 2 different plants that belong to the same family. Isabel watched attentively, her earth-covered fingers moving delicately as she followed the instructions. The Xochimilco sun fell generously on the nursery greenhouses, creating a kaleidoscope of colors in the bougainvillea she was learning to graft. Doña Isabel, you have a natural gift, commented Maria Elena, the young instructor of the Psi floristry course. Your hands seem to understand the language of plants. Isabel smiled, feeling a different warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't the wounded pride she had felt so many times when Mariana had belittled her culinary skills. It was something purer, the simple pleasure of discovering a talent at 65. I just wish I hadn't waited my whole life to do this, she replied, looking at the small miracle she had just created, a branch of white bougainvillea grafted onto a Mexican rose trunk. 3 months had passed since the confrontation in court. 3 months of silence from Mariana, except for occasional messages about practical matters. 3 months in which Isabel had rediscovered the meaning of the word freedom. Upon leaving class, her phone vibrated. An unknown number. Hello? She answered, balancing the ceramic pots she had just acquired. Mrs. Isabel, this is Mateo Gonzalez from the Vasconcelos Library. Did you receive my message about the volunteer program? Isabel's heart accelerated. 2 weeks ago, during a visit to the imposing library to research orchid cultivation, she had come across a poster asking for volunteers to teach older people how to use the internet. An impulse had led her to leave her number. Yes, I received it, she replied, surprised by the enthusiasm in her own voice. Do you still need help? Of course. The project starts next week, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 10 to 12. Isabel adjusted her glasses, smiling to herself. Tuesdays and Thursdays. The days when Mariana visited her only to leave her dog Charo while she went to the hairdresser. I'll be there. The next morning, while watering the new plants in her apartment in Colonia Narvarte, the doorbell rang. Isabel opened the door and found Doña Consuelo, an octogenarian neighbor with whom she had rarely spoken. I brought something for your collection, said the elderly woman, revealing a small cactus in a hand-painted pot. They tell me you're now an expert in plant care. Isabel received the gift with a mixture of surprise and emotion. How beautiful. But I'm not an expert, just a student. We are all students until the end, Doña Isa, Consuelo replied with a conspiratorial smile. Would you like to come to our weekly coffee? We're a group of women who meet in our free time to talk about books and life. The Isabel of 6. Months ago would have refused, claiming she needed to prepare Mariana's favorite food or clean the house for when she arrived. Today's Isabel nodded without hesitation. I'd love to. The weeks turned into a dance of discoveries. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, she taught older men and women to navigate Google, create emails, and use WhatsApp to talk to distant grandchildren. On Wednesdays, she joined the book club, where she surprised everyone with her knowledge of Rosario Castellanos and Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. I always wanted to study literature, she confessed during one of the meetings. But Carlos thought it was a waste of time and money. And then with Mariana, it didn't seem possible. It's never too late to study, replied Doña Mercedes, a retired teacher. UNAM has programs for older adults. I myself went back to classes when I was 70. The idea was planted in Isabel like one of the seeds she now cultivated in her small improvised garden. To study, to learn, to grow. One particularly inspired afternoon, after watching a documentary about Mexican crafts at the library, Isabel began to make a small experimental piñata. Her fingers, now accustomed to delicate work with plants, demonstrated a surprising ability with papier-mâché and vibrant colors. This could be more than a hobby, she murmured to herself as she contemplated the final result. A piñata in the shape of a flowering cactus that perfectly captured the spirit of her new life. The next day, she brought her creation to show to the reading group,